That was very, very nice of Steffi. Thank you, everyone, for staying. In 2007, I had the distinct privilege of speaking with Jane Goodall for my project Wisdom. Something she shared resonated with me and has been an integral driver of my work. Thank you. And I thought it would be a good place to start today.
One thing I think we learn from animals is that we've been very arrogant in assuming that there's this sharp line dividing us from the rest of the animal kingdom. We are not the only beings on this planet with personalities, minds, and above all, feelings and emotions.
The work is an invitation to see, to really look. This mantid, which is very recent work, at first seems alien when you look at it. But as you spend time with it, it begins to feel familiar. And that's what interests me. What is this recognition? Why is this familiar in some way? In order to give the opportunity to engage or to really see it, we liberate the subject from its natural context and shift scale to sort of present it in this very pure and essential way. This is in my studio right now. It's an Asian elephant presented at life scale. One of the very important things about the work is to be able to confront it and have the opportunity to see it. And sometimes scale and clarity have a lot to do with that. I'm fascinated by what we project onto images, how our perceptions shape what we see. So why does this feel intimidating? Does aggression have a form? Their eyes and postures convey a feeling we know, something we instinctively recognize within ourselves. And this act of looking that I'm getting at allows us to recognize another life with its own experiences and emotions. And it's this recognition to this unifying aspects of our world that I'm after in the work. What I find interesting is that this recognition is possible across nature, not just things with eyes and things that we think we've seen. It happens in things we may have never seen, from places we've never been that are generally inaccessible to us. Creatures that have existed for 500 million years, meeting us here in our time. Shapes seem to repeat across nature. You see them in a bean, or a flamingo, in a pea, a giraffe, or a leafy sea dragon. We can see across time through images. We see a whole story, a sprout, a plant, a harvest. We can see entanglements and relationships that we experience. As I continue to produce images across life forms, I see that one of the ways we recognize life is that it exists in time. As these seeds grew, we're germinating these seeds in the studio, and as they grew, I would photograph them and extract the novel color that happened at that moment. So the freshest color, and make that the field in which the seed would sit. And what happens is we can then see the subtle shifts in color, the extraordinary range a plant holds within its life. And so when we look at this image, what we're witnessing is the color palette of this species' life cycle. I'm looking for peak moments in the work that we do. The moment of flowers in its full expression, which is ephemeral. Photography has this unique ability to stop time, so that we can see. In looking across a typology, we notice the subtle, striking differences in color and form and structure, yet beyond these differences, there's a profound commonality, a thread shared across, a sense of life that connects them all. I think that feeling moves a lot faster than logic. And recognition opens the door to feeling, which leads us to thinking. Recognition can also inspire action. When we face the other directly, we see a reflection of ourselves. We're not separate from the rest of nature. We're a part of it. We empathize. We can connect to their subjective reality. They have grace, determination, desire, dignity. We can feel states like contemplation, focus, stillness, speed, and flow. I'm interested in this awareness that we're able to have, which can allow us to recognize something much bigger than ourselves, like beauty. Beauty is very important. It slows us down. Beauty is something we enter into and we participate in. Because when we recognize something as beautiful, we tend to it. Thank you. How often do we think about where we are and how long it's taken to get to now? Under this atmosphere of weather, on top of minerals, created over millions of years, under unimaginable heat and pressure. We can recognize these rocks, these minerals, as living like us when we consider their lifespans over billions of years. It's our temporal perspective that can limit what we see as living. This is why I work with images and optical tools to shift that perspective. So everything we're trying to do is to bring that possibility, that opportunity. Minerals are Earth's expression of time. And photographing them in this way is one way to make the unseen laws of nature, the things we don't see, we don't think about, that happen over vast geological periods of time, visible to the human observer. Each new project, and I'm going to show this is the last one, each new project gives me this opportunity to relook, to reimagine, to recognize. And one of the places that I'd never been, I've traveled all over the planet to see the species and the various subjects I've worked with. But one place I'd never been was the Arctic Circle, and a few months ago I went up there. So this is a short just to show you, to line up the images I'm about to show you. This is the ice wall, by the way, up there. That's the loss of that wall. That's 30 years. So we were able to get up to the top of that fjord, and right when we got up, that glacier calved. And I turned to the guide who was with us and said, "Can we go get some of that ice? I want to look closely at it." And we brought it back and made this little studio in the room I was in to make these images. And what struck me photographing the glacial ice in the Arctic was that its bubbles, every bubble you see, contains the atmosphere from 1 million years ago. As it was melting, literally in front of me, I was breathing the air of 1 million years ago. The ice pictures have a certain prescience because they're testifying to loss. Each of these pieces of ice contain stories of ancient atmospheres and the memory of climates long ago. These stories can connect us to a time beyond our own comprehension. They can reveal the interconnectedness of life, the fragility of ecosystems, and the enormity of time. In the end, my work is an invitation to see, to feel, and to reconnect. And my ultimate question is, if we truly recognize the scale and emotions of this shared life force across nature, can we become better stewards? To bring this vision to life, the last thing I'm going to show you, I've been collaborating for the last year with architects, designers, engineers, logistics experts to create a touring experience, kind of a platform that invites audiences around the world to do just that, to reconnect, to recognize ourselves within nature. So I want to show you a very short piece of what that's going to look like. Thank you, guys. And now I think we're going to take a couple of minutes to get a couple of chairs, and Auguste and I are going to get to have a quick chat. Thank you, Stephanie. You got one.
Andrew, maybe
Some
before
water.
we start chatting, I would be very, very interested in actually asking a question to the audience. So I'm a scientist, so what I would have loved to do is take all of your heart rates and breathing rates and also measure your pupil responses. And what I would have liked to do most is read your minds. Have you felt something while watching these amazing pictures and Andrew's artwork? Who felt a connection?
That's so nice to see.
And are there any people that didn't feel anything, like no connection with nature? Please admit it. We want to know that. We want to. So there's more people that didn't raise their hands. I think people do get touched by your work, and I have to admit, I mean, I love nature, and I know your work, but I find it deeply touching.
Oh, thank you. Well, when you work alone or with just these subjects, you don't have many opportunities. You don't sit with people when they're with books. You don't walk through exhibitions with them. So you don't really get a response feedback loop unless you're somewhere like this. So I appreciate you all being here. Thank you.
But I mean, that's exactly what you want to do, isn't it? That's what I understood. Why are you doing all of that? This is a lot of work, and we talked before how much work it actually is to just to create one of these single insect pictures. That this is almost a task that I could never ever manage to do.
We were talking earlier about these new insect images that I'm working on, which I've been wanting to make for a decade. And in America, most of them are illegal. You can't really get to these mantids. And we didn't really have the optical tools to do them to this level until very recently. Because to present something without the mark of me having made it, which is the idea, that you don't look at the photograph and say, oh, wow, that's the most amazing image. You look at it and you say, that's the most incredible insect. I've never seen that before. You feel it, and it's about a direct relationship. To do that, it's really, really hard, especially when they move. So you have to take many, many pictures for all the focus planes and then reconstruct the animal. So
Yeah, they move all the time.
they move all the time. So constantly, and they shake in minute ways. So those images, what you saw, one of the first ones you saw maybe was 40 or 50 hours of someone in my studio sitting there putting it together, all of the various pieces. So, and to create the elephant, say at life scale, we recently actually did a giraffe at 17 feet tall. They're made from hundreds of images that are then mapped back on, tons of close-ups so that we can present it at life scale. And in the case of the elephant, there's no piece of paper that's that big. There's no ground plane that's seamless. So, we get a piece of Belgian linen, which is right now rare to find. There's a supply chain crisis in Belgian linen, if anyone knows that. I found that out recently. And we create we lay gesso down, calcium carbonate, like crushed marble and rabbit skin glue, so there's no chemicals, so it'll never yellow, and then sand it and paint it and sand it and paint it and sand it, and then put it on a plotter to shoot the pigment into it so that it can then have just enough bend to be able to go on a roll to go into a space and then get stretched like a canvas and put up. So the technical complications of my work are yeah, just a pain in the ass. It's really hard to make the work, and it's expensive and it's time consuming. But the reason why I do that is because
Exactly. Why?
I want to see it, and I believe deeply that, I think I did say it in the talk, feeling moves faster than logic, and I believe that if we can access the subconscious, that 90% of feeling, it can enable us to the 10% of thinking, and then maybe with that little bit of thinking we do, we might, as I said, become better stewards. We might connect and understand that we're a part of something bigger, and we're not separate from nature. We talked about this idea that, you know, it's pretty recent that human beings are so separated from nature. It's only a couple hundred years, and we have an opportunity right now to reframe our thinking, and if we can do that, we may be able to move forward with some sense of hope.
Yes, I think your work, we were talking about Edward Wilson before, and he coined the term biophilia. And we also talked about the book Awe by Kelter that I know you're a big fan of, which basically says that if you feel that there's something bigger out there, that if you have this awe inspiration, that then we are more likely to get emotionally engaged and then ultimately act. And if I understand correctly, that's exactly what you want to do. You want to touch people to make them act and save our planet.
Absolutely. I mean, E.O. Wilson has that famous idea that, well, biophilia, which is literally love for nature. So a big question is, how do we fall in love with the rest of nature, with each other, with all the species that we share the planet with? And separately, he made he helped us understand the idea that if we were to go extinct, the planet would be just fine. If the insects were to go extinct, it's over. And so, you know, the work you do is so fascinating because what you're doing is you're helping us understand that animal intelligence and cognition is not owned by humans. That you know, I'd love for you to share with the audience a bit about the work you do, specifically with parrots and some of the insights you've had by working with them.
Yeah, well, it relates to Jane Goodall's message initially, and I think that's something that connects us. So I've also met her when I was 14 years old, and she inspired me to become a scientist, and that's what I did. I studied animal behavior, and then I actually, when Jane Goodall started her work, people didn't even know about the behavior of our closest relatives. We didn't know anything about chimpanzees and gorillas. We knew nothing. That shows our arrogance. And when I started my scientific career, that was the beginning when people started to study other species, the intelligence of other minds, and that's what I've been doing the last 20 years. So trying to prove scientifically that animals have minds and that they can think, and we are able to show that crows and parrots are on par with great apes, with our closest relatives.
Did you guys catch that when I heard that from her, I could not believe that. We have this idea that just our closest relatives are sort of close to our abilities with cognition, but that parrots and crows are on par with that as well. I mean, what does that show us?
Yeah, well, it should make us reconsider we are part of nature. We are not above nature. We are part of nature, and we should be much more respectful with our conspecifics, and that's what makes life beautiful. And that's what I think your idea, I find it absolutely great, and I hope that we can collaborate with the Biotopia project, because the mission is very similar. It's the idea to enthuse people for nature, to really engage people emotionally, to make them act and really face the big environmental challenges that our planet is experiencing. And one key ingredient to do that is, to catch people emotionally, but also to educate education is key. If we don't know, we won't act either. We need both knowledge and emotion.
You mentioned Keltner's work. I strongly recommend his latest book on awe, but he talks about the awe-altruism link, and he makes a distinction between conceptual awe and perceptual awe. So perceptual awe, like we're at a big vista or we're seeing something, and we're never quite the same afterwards. Or a conceptual experience with awe, a big idea like what she just shared, and your mind's kind of blown, and you tend to not be the same. Astronauts talk about the overview effect, how they come back from space and their minds have changed and they see the planet as one unified system. And so, the reason that I've spent the last year building this idea about this mobile museum is that I'm noticing that with all the data and everything we've experienced over the last 15 years, not much seems to change. And I'm wondering if we've skipped the step of awe and gotten right to the data and the thinking. And the best way to get into the thinking and the change is through an experience of awe. So I'm imagining, a 15-year-old walking through this and then winding up in the final section, which is that theater, and then maybe someone comes in and talks about a technology that they might want to work in, whether it's, clean energy or becoming a behavioral cognitive specialist like Auguste. So I think that we need to open our minds before we can consider possibility afterwards. And that's the function of United Nature. I want to create a tool for sort of mind-opening and emotional experience that can then enable tons of programming that is actionable.
Yeah, that is maybe a good conclusion, and that's also what I couldn't agree more. That's also exactly what Biotopia wants to do, the Bavarian Life Science Museum, to empower people to act and see all the big chances that lie in life sciences. So we just need to show people that there's lots of ways of how they can get engaged and make a big change and change our planet to the better. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much.